All right, so before I hit the magic start discussion button, let's just go around the virtual room if everybody wants to do a little quick introduction, who you are, where you're joining from.
Sure, I can kick it off.
Okay.
My name's Colin Mulholland. I'm coming from Atlanta, Georgia. I lead a change management practice at a healthcare technology company called Change Healthcare. Uh, I've been working in parallel and with Jason for the better part of like 12 or 18 months, formally, informally, and I've got a deep interest for what I refer to as people first transformation or people first systemic change, whether that's at Change Healthcare or externally, starting to explore that with uh, SaaS companies and tech startups here in Atlanta.
Awesome. Welcome.
There you go. My name is Matt Dominici. I'm an Agile coach and trainer out of Toronto, Canada. Before that, I spent a lot of time in QA, managing QA teams, that sort of thing.
Good morning, I'm Kelly. I lead, innovation and process improvement for a commercial construction company in the Twin Cities in Minnesota.
And Jane, I see you keep getting kind of bounced in and out. So we were just doing introductions.
Hi, I'm Jane Brown-Sword. I work for Hi, can you hear?
It's cutting in and out. Okay. Okay, so I'll hit the, if you just want to type in the chat, if your audio isn't coming through, just where you're joining from, and a little bullet point about yourself. There we go. Oh, cool. Okay, awesome. So Lean Coffee Table, you hit the magic start discussion button, and it will automatically order stuff. So anything that gets votes goes to the to discuss column. Anything that has no votes just sits in a backlog in topics. So we're going to start with what capabilities, disciplines might we focus on for the next few weeks that we want to take beyond the pandemic days. All right. So Lean Coffee Table gives you an option to select how much time. We'll say 7 minutes for now, and it automatically creates the timer. And Colin, if you want to give us a little bit of context. So usually, whoever asked the question, then you give them a little bit of time at the start of the time box to just go a little bit deeper.
Sure. Yeah. So context shaping here would be my work around organizational change and business transformation internally has really been put on pause, and I've been pulled into 3 task forces. And in the near term here, we've been focused a lot on tactical, how do we move people to work from home environment? What support do we need? What are our at-risk populations? I intend for the conversation to evolve to how do we develop resilience? How do we move toward more iterative feedback loops? So I think my question is mostly around what are we doing today that is benefiting us that we could take with us long term.
Cool. We had a similar question last week, and it was around a couple of things. That is this a good opportunity to start bringing in more complexity thinking into our organizations? That we think we're in a more of an ordered, structured, plan, do, check, act, linear kind of progression of how we improve things. And is this the opportunity to talk about how there's more in our organizational ecosystems that we can't be predictable with? How markets change, how, if we look at Ralph Stacey's complexity matrix or Dave Snowden's Canavan, how do we look at unordered systems that we can't control? Is this giving us an entry point into that? And I think it was brought on by, at least, I don't know, here in the Canadian media, the anti-government media outlets are always grilling the Prime Minister on why do you refuse to tell everyone exactly how long this will take? So they're using that finite language. And obviously it's a stupid question, and I don't even think they actually believe it. I think they're just trying to do what media does, which is spark outrage. But we don't live in a predictable world. We never have. But is this the wake-up call that has leaders realizing that there's less? They don't have complete control over their organization as they might have thought.
I feel like this whole thing has certainly exposed a lot of that stuff that was kind of already there, but we had this luxury of having this kind of veneer over it that made us feel like, yeah, there is a bit of order in place, and it is a little bit more structured than it really is, because there were never really consequences to the problems that kind of come up with that. So I feel like a lot of this stuff is already there. This is just making it so that, like, you can't really hide from it anymore.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I agree. Those questions are ridiculous, though. It's hard to watch those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the capabilities that is hovering in our organization positively is that of empathy. And I find a lot less superficial small talk and more, even if it's awkward for people to ask consistently, how are you doing, versus what is the weather like in your area. I'm very intrigued by how to make people aware for the reason they're asking that, because they care and they probably always care. But it's easy to slide back into this, what's the weather like, because there's no conflict there.
Is it kind of like bringing the humanity back into work?
That's exactly it. I mean, Carson Tams, I believe his name is, writes about human flourishing. And it's really, it's that focal point where the blend of the complexity thinking with empathy is like, we don't know all the answers, but I see you as a human and I respect your abilities to help contribute to this path forward. Let's go together. And I think maybe that's the other thought of let's go together, because there's a lot of folks that don't have the time to wait 90 days to make a decision. It needs to be moved quicker than some of our systems, at least for us, are used to.
Mm-hmm. So do you think there's any new capabilities that we're seeing today we didn't see before this, or is now the spotlight just on things we've already known but never really paid attention to?
It's difficult to remove my bias because we live and breathe it. But I believe at the masses, or the masses at least, the understanding of their critical importance during these times is starting to be more deeply understood, versus just a Harvard Business Review. I heard this quote once. It makes sense. Now back to work. So I think the depth of understanding is starting to be explored for some for the first time.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be interesting to see how much of that sticks, for lack of a better word, once it all passes, kind of thing. To your point, it's really easy to kind of slide back into the more superficiality side of things. But I think that's an interesting question: is how do we take that stuff out of this whole thing and actually like bake it into the culture going forward?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be as simple as, Matt, before you joined, Jason was talking about 9/11 and how it took about a year, maybe a year and a half, for us to maybe revert back to a different normal. But it could be something as simple and powerful as naming that people are doing something. Because if we just assume that everyone understands what they're doing, as opposed to like saying like, wow, this is so powerful, when our team meets now, for the first 5 minutes, we're checking in and we're genuinely asking how each other are doing.
So like actually calling it out, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we're doing this thing that's different, and look how awesome it is.
That's right.
Yeah, I like it.
So now we get the opportunity to vote. So once you hit the time box in Lean Coffee Table, this is taken from the idea of consent, not consensus, which is the origin of the thumb voting. So as long as no one disagrees, because you might be indifferent, we decided we want to move on to the next topic or not. In Lean Coffee Table, it just works as basically you decide in a discussion. So you can hit the thumbs up or thumbs down, and we'll just take whichever one has the majority of the votes, and then you can end or extend the discussion. So if everybody wants to put their vote on there. And don't worry if you're clicking the screen share, wondering why it won't vote, because it's Monday and people have done that before too.
Jason, I logged out and logged back in, and I can't get to the voting now, but I'm good to go forward.
Okay. Okay. To the next discussion?
Yeah, the next one.
Okay. So I'll just hit the end on this one, and then you can move that to discussed, and then we take the next one. So how might we leverage short-term task forces to deliver value beyond the crisis? Okay.
Yeah, so this one might not be too different from the one prior. You heard a little bit of the context shaping. So I'm on our employee experience team is now shifted completely to COVID. There's a people leader and team member organizational effectiveness task force, and then there's a rethinking people solutions that just happens to coincide with this pandemic. And something that is intriguing is when crisis hits certain leaders, certain pockets of the organization that are used to control and used to executing on very specific tasks, regardless of value add. Everyone thinks that, or those populations believe that we need to create something new, as maybe we need to narrow what we're focused on and deliver here better, or put more resources here. So that's maybe there's a extra component built on the last question around teaming, or just resource shifting to where the most value is, as opposed to what your job title was when you were hired.
Interesting. No unions there, hopefully. That would make that a little more complicated.
Correct. Yeah. So not that I'm aware of. I'm sure we have them.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think there's any unions that we directly participate with.
Okay. It's an interesting parameter, I guess, to talk about, because one organization that I worked in where I've never worked in an organization that had unionized software people before until this place. So it was just such a foreign concept. But exactly that question of if you're shifting towards working in an agile way, your job description, how you do your job is different. And then they filed complaints to the union. You can't make us work with people outside of our specialty. That's not in our collective bargaining agreement. So, what's the when you mentioned around outside of your title and what you were hired for, how is it easier to go back to that conversation around expectations now? Whereas, because we always kind of say we want to do less with more, let's think outside the box, let's not worry about roles and responsibilities, blah, blah, blah. And is it easier to have that conversation now?
Yeah. It's almost like forced entry. It's like we used to have this like limiting belief that where we were positioned when we were formed as my small team a year ago versus now we're 4 times as big.
Mm-hmm.
And we've yet to come back holistically to look at like what problems have we solved that have been beneficial, what problems are we being asked to solve for now, and are the way we are oriented aligned with the most we could possibly deliver for our group of people. So it's like, I think it's those simple retrospective type questions. And because of the pandemic, and when everything just stopped, everything that was so important just stopped and just shifted to a different, something more important.
Mm-hmm.
It's been really intriguing.
I've always latched on to the idea of this type of work just being white space work. And I mean, Matt, you've probably seen this for years too in the Agile space, right? Everybody wants to know is what's the metric to measure the effectiveness of your Agile coaches? And it's a question that no one has an answer to. Everyone has an opinion on it, but if you look at the word coach, coaches are not tying themselves to an outcome. And we want black and white. We want a list of show me the success metrics, and then we end up with a bunch of bullshit that just doesn't matter.
Yep.
I went into one organization and they asked me in the initial conversation, how will we know that you're being effective for us? And I said, why don't in the lobby, why don't you put up a big whiteboard with how much you're paying me and have people put a little mark from 0 to 10 if they're getting their money's worth. I wish they would have done that. That would have been an awesome picture to show. But it goes to those questions: how valuable and why? Like a modified net promoter score. That the benefit is in the discussion we're having around how beneficial it's been, not a return on investment. Because any type of my belief is anybody who's doing this type of change work, outcomes are a long lagging effect. There's a long tail, especially in Agile, that you're going to see a benefit, right? You can't just switch a team over to using good technical practices and then their next release goes from 1,000 defects to 0. It just doesn't work that way. So is it more, with those task forces, what they're trying to do? Some people are just really good at working in the white space and helping people make sense of their context. I've had 3 personal coaches in my career. I couldn't come up with an ROI or a bullet point of the success factor, but it's been hugely beneficial.
I was going to say, like, if you could imagine, what your life or your professional life would be like if you removed any one of those coaches from your history in like an alternate timeline kind of way, and like, that doesn't lend itself to producing a chart or a diagram that shows what the ROI was.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one. It's just, it's not that black and white.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got 2 votes to extend.
So I'm curious to like push that further a little bit. Are there ROI indicators? Are there ROI indicators that may at first seem like vanity metrics that will at least get you, and I'm not asking for what they are, it's like, is the, for an environment that needs something, might a vanity metric or some kind of collection of metrics be a decent entry point or better than nothing when you know the lagging indicator or the lagging outcome is going to take some time? Like, would it create some leash?
I think there can be some that are better than nothing. On the flip side of that, there can be many that are probably worse than nothing, right? In that they can actually make things worse. And I think that's probably, Jason, what you were kind of alluding to, some of the metrics that I'm just going with Agile coaching because that's what I'm familiar with. But like some of the metrics that some people try to show are weird things like velocity and all this kind of stuff. And it has, I think, a negative impact on probably the organization or the group. It may have a positive impact on the consultant's day rate, but not so much on the actual the actual results that the organization and the company are seeing. And sometimes it just has like a total blow up in your face kind of effect that happens. Again, even that happens a little bit later and after the fact, right? It's not a right away thing, but all of a sudden you're year into it and you're like, oh, our velocity's been going up, but like our customers all hate us.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I like to shift towards diagnostics as opposed to ROI and metrics. Is how do we all we get so locked into having a solid vision statement and these linear binary types of things when we all kind of know we want to go that way. We know we're kind of marching into the fog. We know we want to do it. We know there's something good over there, but we just need something that tells us how close we are to falling off the bridge, into the water type of thing, and change them when we need to. I just dug up a picture of what I typically use is how valuable has it been having a coach from 0 to 10 and why. And then this is anonymous feedback that goes right to your stakeholders who have brought me in.
I love that.
And it's a case of here's what happened, decide what to do. If you don't think you're getting the value that you should be getting, then let's just cancel the contract. Like it's not a I'm going to give you the data. You decide what to do with it. So first question, how valuable and why? Second question, what was missing? And the third one, what do we do next? And then now you have a decision point. Do you want to keep going? Do you want to stop? Do you want to pause? What do you want to do? Usually but this has to be, an authentic, genuine kind of process, because it's really, I think it's a display in, you've brought me here to help. I'm doing my best to help. I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen, but here's how I'm going to show you what's going on.
It's awesome.
We found one way to counteract knee-jerk decisions or just completely subjective inputs is by bringing to the table some set of empathy interviews or some set of, here's what your users and customers, the people that you say on your value statement that you're hyper-focused around, here's what their opinion of X is. And not as a like, we're right, you're wrong, but it's like exactly like you're saying, it influences a decision point of if your choice is different than that, just be mindful that you're also not aligned with where your people are, and we'll have to solve for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's a way. I don't. The noise is very loud when the timer comes up. I don't know if there's a way to stop that or not, but I don't know if anybody else finds it as obtrusive as I do. It just
Yeah, it's pretty loud.
blasts in your ears. All right, so we got the majority of votes. And we move on to the final question. All right. Leveraging feedback loops to build community around well-being and mindfulness efforts.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit more targeted. In a large company, we have 15,000 employees, 15,000 contractors, and we're heavily distributed, which I guess everyone is now. But it's this idea that feedback loops don't necessarily need to be a formal thing. And this is likely outside of the R&D IT space, because folks there more or less get it or choose not to get it. But in the business world, where we're starting to see a lot more informal feedback loops, whether it's those meeting check-ins or whether it is something on a social media internal site. And it's really intriguing, as well as this interest towards well-being and just general tactics. Now that people have more space, they've got to live with anxiety that is very real, that maybe they could be busy enough to sweep under the rug in the past. So I'm curious of what you all have seen, or relative interest in the feedback loops as a way to promote well-being and mindfulness in that authentic way.
And one thing that I've noticed, well, two things. Like one of the clients that I work with, and I'm sure almost all companies are doing this now. They're using Slack or Teams or whatever, and you're seeing all these channels pop up. There's like a channel specifically about people that are interested in like the specifics of COVID-19 and what's going on. People talking about that stuff, but then you see other ones popping up like working from home tips or stuck at home with the kids. And the second thing I noticed is people seem to be a lot more open about expressing those anxieties that you were talking about, whereas to your point before, it was a lot easier to just ignore it, or a lot of them weren't there. They weren't as prominent, so why talk about it? But in terms of informal feedback loops, I don't know about you all, but I've been seeing a lot more willingness to share, whereas before you'd never hear. And I'm talking about like pretty stuffy organizations, financial institutions, that kind of thing. And like even within those contexts, people are talking about it, asking for tips. What do you do when both parents are at home working and you've got a toddler running around the house that also needs to be taken care of, which hits home for me right now. And yeah, people are talking about it, and they're sharing their anxieties, they're sharing their tips, and kind of helping each other out that way, I guess.
I think a simple thing that we could do is with all of our, Skype meetings, etc., doing a quick round table at the beginning of everybody share one thing you did for yourself in the last week. Just one thing. Kind of like an icebreaker.
Yeah, I love the meeting check-in. And I love that prompt of one thing you're doing for yourself. One of the other prompts I've liked is what's worrying you, because it could go the spectrum of business related, and you start to identify who the human is that you're working with on the other side
Mm.
and their unique set of circumstances. Another practice that I had a colleague reach out to me before today was just introducing square breathing and introducing it at the front of meetings. It's like, hey, when we kick off this meeting that happens every 2 weeks, we're gonna do square breathing as a way to just kind of step into this space with a little bit more clear mind, or a way to take a break from all of the other noise in the world.
Mm-hmm. I put the core protocols in the chat. I think it's core. I don't think it's a coreprotocols.com or whatever, but it's the similar to the thumb voting, the check-in. How to do simple check-ins at the start of any sessions. Yeah. It reminded me of a really cool thing that Jürgen Appelow's been talking about forever, for at least 10 years. We're after mental closeness, not physical closeness. So before any of this stuff happened, all of his practices and stuff that he wrote about and talked about was that's what it's about. It's mental. It's always been mental closeness, not physical closeness. And I think the Agile community made a bet on co-location as being the thing, and we've seen how that's kind of manifested itself, and now the community is kind of like, oops, sorry.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, the check-in has been popular in the Agile world for quite a while. I know Jim McCarthy, Jim and what's her name? What's his wife's name? Do you remember his wife's name, Matt? Jim and Sandy?
I don't remember.
It's like Michelle. I just bumped into it.
Yeah. So I don't know the origins before that, but that's been quite popular in Agile circles. Yeah. I think that the hard part is if you've never been affected by any mental illness, anxiety, depression, or whatever, that stuff just seems like a bunch of bullshit. And it's and from people who have family members with any type of mental illness, I think it works both ways. So it's recognize that some people will think this is bullshit and some people won't, but we need to consider both. Some people who have experienced that shouldn't go on the offensive and say, well, you're a bad person because you don't believe in this. It works both ways. And I think we only focus it on the one way sometimes.
Yeah. There's a football coach, college football coach, Dabo Sweeney, who coaches at Clemson. And he had a great quote around just kind of moving through all of the noise, because everyone's a critic now with social media. And probably everyone's been a critic in the break room forever or on their lazy boy. And he said, I never take criticism from someone I wouldn't take advice from.
Oh, nice.
And it just nails it, because it's like, man, like I can't get around like this person's opinion about X. Well, it's like, would you take advice from them? And if not, like just keep moving.
Yeah. Yeah, ignore it. It's so hard with I never look at Twitter trending anymore, because it would just make me so angry, the stupid things that people get upset about and the pile-on mentality. There's a really good interview, if anybody remembers the Monica Lewinsky scandal from the 90s with Bill Clinton. She did an interview with John Oliver a couple of years ago, because she went through that 20 years ago, which every person who makes any public slip up goes through it at a massive scale nowadays.
Sure.
So the pile-on mentality of humanity is still there, but social media makes it so much worse.
What I've loved to see, and I don't think LinkedIn is as bad with the people that are kind of just there to stir it up, but when the strength of your community can be informally determined by if someone else is willing to step in to your trench and say like, hey, like we're shutting that off. So like they like appreciate your feedback, like take it somewhere else, kind of what would happen in a playground type of mentality, which is kind of neat.
Hmm. Yeah, we see it with social distancing. There's a like a mom's Facebook group that my wife is in, uh, and they will be out with their cameras, taking pictures and posting them online, saying, "Look at this person. They're out at a park." Wow, who cares? Like,
Yeah,
go live your life.
yeah,
There's just like you said, the armchair quarterback. Yeah, it's fun to talk about with a couple of pops during the game, but at the end of the day, who cares?
yeah,
Do your thing, live your life. Some people are going to like it, some people aren't going to like it. Just ignore the pylon, and there you go. It's just so much more uh, enjoyable,
yep.
I think.
I had someone reach out to me from Colombia, and he put an expression in Spanish, and then I Google translated it because it was a little rough. Um, and it essentially said, um, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in the stands that want to judge people with sweaty jerseys. And I mean, between those two comments, like it makes so much sense, and there's so much more peace when it's like, hey man, like my jersey's got sweat on it, and we're doing something about it.
Yeah,
I hope it's nice in the stands. I
yeah,
do, and I hope it gets better, and I hope one day you'll appreciate it. But until then, like until there's sweat on your jersey, like your opinion's gonna matter as a fan, as a spectator.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Enjoy it or do something else.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There was Wayne Gretzky and Connor McDavid, two of the best hockey players ever. Uh, did a little chat on YouTube a couple of days ago, talked about the exact same thing because the interviewer asks them about, do you pay attention to what's going on online and this, and they said you can't. It's pointless, and you could just never keep up with it because everybody's an expert. The internet's made everybody an expert, and you'll go insane. You'll just
Right.
completely go insane, and you'll lose focus of what matters. Yeah, cool. So we're hitting 11 o'clock. These are recorded, so they're posted up there. The only time I won't release a recording if there was anything personal shared that anybody didn't want to put out there. So every Monday, 10 o'clock, we run these sessions, and I usually just put some bullet points and some links for any references that came out. And I'm fine to stick around and chat if anybody has nothing else to do, but thanks very much for taking the time to join. Jane, hopefully the audio was okay for you. I see you got your hand raised for the meeting. Is your audio working now, or? No, can't hear. I see you talking, but I can't hear. Oh, okay, on your phone, but muted. Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Jason.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Nice to meet you all.
Likewise.
Yep. Good seeing you guys. And the recording will be up probably in an hour-ish or so. Is it really Easter week? Oh my God. Yeah. Oh boy.
Oh, yeah. What do you know?
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
Jason. Bye.